Eric Cantona, the king who transformed Manchester United. The transfer from Leeds United to Manchester United in 1992 arrived with a controversy that few transfers could match. Eric Cantona, Leeds' mercurial striker who'd just helped Howard Wilkinson's side win the final First Division title before the Premier League era, was suddenly departing in a move that felt like betrayal to Leeds supporters. But for Alex Ferguson, the Scottish manager of Manchester United, Cantona represented something that money couldn't always buy: a player with the mentality of a champion, the technical brilliance of a continental master, and the kind of volatility that could either transform a club or destroy it from within. Cantona's early career had been marked by brilliance and controversy in equal measure. At a Cannes, he'd shown exceptional talent, but also an inability to accept authority, leading to disciplinary issues that caused friction with management. At Auxerre, he'd impressed but remained largely unknown outside France. Marseille came next, where his quality shone through, but so did his mercurial temperament. By the time he arrived in English football at Leeds, he was already a polarizing figure, adored by teammates who recognized his genius, criticized by opponents and officials who'd experienced his darker moments. Ferguson had watched Cantona carefully during his time at Leeds, understanding that the Frenchman possessed a rare combination of gifts. His technical ability was exceptional. His first touch, his vision, his ability to find space in crowded areas. These were world-class qualities. But what truly impressed Ferguson was Cantona's intelligence about the game, his understanding of positioning, his ability to elevate teammates through his mere presence on the pitch. The volatility was a concern, certainly, but Ferguson believed he could manage it, could channel it, could transform it into something productive. The first training session at Manchester United proved immediately enlightening. Cantona strode onto the pitch at the Cliff training ground like he owned it, his confidence bordering on arrogance. Players watched this Frenchman with dark eyes and intense features, recognizing immediately that this was someone different from the typical Manchester United footballer. Cantona didn't adapt to how others played. He expected others to adapt to him. During one drill, a defender made a heavy challenge on Cantona, catching him late. Most players would have accepted it as part of training intensity. Cantona erupted, his French accent thick with anger, his face flushed with fury. He confronted the defender directly, his voice cutting through the training ground noise. "Do that again and I'll do something about it. Understand, in my team, we respect each other. On the pitch or off, that won't happen." The defender, a seasoned professional, could have resented the confrontation. Instead, he respected it. Cantona wasn't complaining or being soft. He was establishing standards, making clear what he would and wouldn't accept. Ferguson watched from the sideline, his expression showing neither approval nor disapproval, but his eyes gleaming with something approaching satisfaction. After training, Ferguson called Cantona to his office, the young Frenchman entering expecting criticism. Instead, the manager surprised him. "That intensity today, Eric. That's what we need. But I need you to understand something. You have extraordinary gifts. Your technical ability is exceptional, but your greatest gift is your personality, your ability to inspire others, to demand excellence. If you can channel that without letting it destroy you, you'll be unstoppable. I don't accept mediocrity, boss. In everything I do, I demand the highest standard. Good, neither do I. That's why we'll succeed together." The early Premier League matches showed Cantona adapting remarkably quickly to English football. His style of play was different from what Premier League defenders were accustomed to. He wasn't physically dominant in the way strikers typically were, but he was intelligent, creative, capable of producing moments of magic from apparently nothing. Defenders who relied on physical approaches found themselves bewildered by his technical trickery. But it was his leadership that truly transformed Manchester United. Cantona possessed an almost hypnotic confidence, a belief in himself that seemed to transmit to teammates. When things went wrong, he didn't panic or hide. He demanded the ball, demanded that United attack, demanded more from everyone around him. His presence seemed to elevate the entire team. In one crucial match against Arsenal, with United trailing and time running out, Cantona took control of the game completely. He demanded possession constantly, created chances for teammates through his vision and positioning, and when an opportunity came, he finished with clinical precision. As he celebrated, he made a gesture that would become iconic, pressing his finger to his lips, demanding silence from Arsenal supporters, projecting an arrogance that bordered on disrespectful but somehow transcended into art. Roy Keane, United's captain at the time, approached Cantona after that match. "I've never seen anything like what you did out there. You completely controlled the game through sheer force of will. This is what I do, Roy. I make things happen. I decide games through my presence, through my intelligence, through refusing to accept anything less than victory. You feel it too, yes. When I'm on the pitch, we're different. We're stronger." Keane nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in Cantona's words. United were indeed transformed by the Frenchman's presence. His influence extended beyond goals. He organized play, demanded movement from teammates, created space through his positioning. The club that had been struggling, that had finished second to Leeds, was suddenly becoming genuinely dangerous again. Ferguson began to build around Cantona, recognizing that this was the player who could drive Manchester United back to dominance. The recruitment changed, the tactics shifted to maximize Cantona's influence. Younger players were brought in not just for their individual qualities, but for their ability to complement Cantona's style. Mark Hughes provided physicality and presence. Ryan Giggs offered raw pace and directness. Paul Scholes brought technical quality and intelligence. By the end of the 1992 to 1993 season, Manchester United were genuinely competitive again. They finished close to the top, competing for the title in a way that suggested this was just the beginning. But more importantly, they played with a confidence and attacking flair that had been absent for years. Cantona was the catalyst, the difference maker, the player who'd transformed United's mentality from also-rans to contenders. The 1993 to 1994 season brought Manchester United to the precipice of glory. With Cantona at the heart of everything they did, United played attacking football that thrilled supporters and terrorized opponents. The Frenchman's influence grew with each passing week. His goals came regularly, but more importantly, his presence seemed to elevate everyone around him. Young players who might have struggled in high-pressure situations suddenly performed with confidence when Cantona was orchestrating things from the center of the pitch. Ferguson, recognizing that Cantona had become the linchpin of everything United were building, began to give the Frenchman increasing responsibility, not just on the pitch, but in the dressing room as well. Cantona became the voice that demanded standards, the presence that commanded respect through sheer force of personality. Roy Keane remained captain, but everyone understood that Cantona was the true leader, the player whose approval mattered most, whose standards everyone else had to meet. The title race that season came down to the final matches, with Manchester United, Blackburn Rovers and Newcastle United all battling for supremacy. In the crucial moments, Cantona was extraordinary. Against Ipswich Town, he scored the goal that kept United's title hopes alive. Against West Ham, he orchestrated a performance of such control and elegance that the match became almost a masterclass in how football should be played. His intelligence was evident in every touch, every movement, every decision. In the penultimate match of the season, with United facing West Ham at home and the title within reach, Cantona produced a performance that transcended football into the realm of art. He didn't just score, he conducted the orchestra. Every pass seemed perfectly weighted, every movement designed to create space for teammates. When the final whistle blew, confirming victory, Cantona had delivered the message. Manchester United were champions in waiting. The final match, a meaningless fixture against Coventry City, became a coronation. With the title secured the previous week, Manchester United approached this match with the confidence of champions. Cantona played with the swagger of a man who'd transformed his club, who'd taken them from mediocrity to dominance through sheer force of will and exceptional talent. When the match finished, confirming United as Premier League champions for the first time in the modern era, the celebrations were joyous, but somehow not entirely surprising. Everyone had felt it coming. In the dressing room, as champagne sprayed and players celebrated, Ferguson embraced Cantona with genuine warmth. "You did this, Eric. You made this happen. You transformed this club. We did it together, boss. But yes, I knew we would win. I could feel it from the beginning. This club was meant for me." The swagger, which in other players might have seemed arrogant, felt justified. Cantona had delivered on his implicit promise. He'd arrived and transformed Manchester United from contenders into champions. The gratitude from supporters was enormous, and for the first time in English football, a Frenchman was being celebrated as a genuine saviour of an elite club. But success brought complications. With Cantona now the undisputed star of Manchester United, with his influence extending far beyond football into the realm of celebrity and commercial opportunity, new pressures emerged. Opposition defenders began targeting him with increasing physicality, knowing that if they could disrupt his rhythm, they could disrupt United's attacking play. The referees, rather than protecting the creative players being fouled, seemed to allow the physical challenges to continue unchecked. The frustration built within Cantona, though he managed it reasonably well during matches, but the tension was becoming visible in his demeanour, in the way he responded to challenges with increasing intensity, in the edge that entered his voice when disputing decisions with referees. Ferguson monitored this carefully, understanding that the volatility that gave Cantona his genius could also be his downfall if allowed to spiral unchecked. In the FA Cup final of 1994 at Wembley against Chelsea, Cantona delivered a performance of such magnificence that it seemed to confirm he was indeed destined for immortality. He scored the winning goal in extra time, his finish clinical and composed, despite the enormous pressure. As he celebrated, he pointed to the United supporters, claiming the moment as his own, making clear that this trophy, like everything else he touched, bore his signature. The summer following the double, Premier League and FA Cup, brought the first serious test of Cantona's commitment to Manchester United. Other clubs, recognizing his brilliance, made serious approaches. AC Milan, one of Europe's greatest clubs, offered extraordinary wages and the opportunity to compete in the Champions League. The offer was tempting, certainly, but Cantona declined it. "Why would I leave?" Ferguson asked, understanding the enormity of what Cantona was rejecting. "Because this is my project now. Manchester United is my club. We've just won the double, but we're going to win more, much more. I want to build a dynasty here." The commitment was profound. Cantona had established himself as one of world football's elite talents, yet he was choosing to remain at Manchester United, choosing to continue building rather than seeking instant gratification through a move to another elite club. It suggested that for Cantona, the project mattered more than personal glory or financial reward. The 1994 to 1995 season began with United as favourites to repeat their success. Cantona arrived at pre-season training carrying the weight of expectation, but also with renewed hunger. He understood that defending a title was harder than winning it initially, that maintaining standards when opponents were studying your methods was more challenging than introducing something new. Yet the season also brought visible signs that the volatility within Cantona was becoming harder to manage. In training, his challenges became increasingly aggressive. In matches, his responses to fouls became more theatrical, more confrontational. Ferguson spoke to him repeatedly about channeling his intensity without allowing it to undermine his discipline. "Eric, your intensity is your greatest strength, but you need to be smart about it. Don't give referees reasons to send you off. Make your presence felt through your football, not through aggression." Cantona listened and generally managed to maintain control, but the tension was becoming visible. It was as if the pressure of being the player upon whom everything depended, the player responsible for maintaining United's dominance, was beginning to take its toll. The genius and the darkness that inhabited Cantona were increasingly in conflict, and eventually that conflict would explode in a moment that would define his career as much as any trophy or goal. The moment arrived on January 25th, 1995 at Selhurst Park. Manchester United were playing Crystal Palace in what should have been a routine Premier League match. But Cantona was already on edge. The frustration of being repeatedly fouled without adequate protection from referees building within him like pressure in a sealed container. In the 34th minute, the moment came that would define his career as much as any trophy. A Crystal Palace defender, Richard Shaw, brought Cantona down with a challenge that the Frenchman considered excessive. In that instant, something snapped. Rather than accepting the decision or protesting to the referee with words, Cantona reacted with a kung fu kick aimed directly at Shaw. The action, captured by television cameras and witnessed by thousands in the stadium, would become one of football's most infamous moments. The red card came immediately, and Cantona was sent off. But more than the dismissal itself, it was the reaction of the crowd that intensified the moment. Palace supporters hurled abuse at the departing Frenchman, and rather than simply leaving the pitch, Cantona launched into the crowd, attacking a spectator who'd been particularly vocal in his criticism. The scene was chaotic, violent, shocking, one of football's greatest talents revealing the darkest aspects of his temperament on the sport's biggest stage. Back in the dressing room, Cantona sat in silence, gradually comprehending what he'd done. The initial rage had dissipated, replaced by a cold realization of the consequences. Ferguson entered, his expression unreadable. Rather than erupting in anger as many expected, the manager simply looked at his star player. "Eric, you've just done something that will define your career if you let it. You have a choice now about who you become." Cantona looked up, his dark eyes reflecting turmoil. "I lost control. That's not who I am." "Isn't it?" Ferguson responded quietly. "That's exactly who you are, a man with extraordinary talent, but also extraordinary rage. The question is what you do with it now." The fallout was immediate and severe. The Football Association banned Cantona for 6 months, a punishment that seemed designed to humiliate him as much as sanction him. Media outlets called for his permanent expulsion from English football. Opposition supporters wore T-shirts mocking the incident. For a player accustomed to being celebrated, the sudden reversal was psychologically devastating. During the long ban, Cantona had nothing but time to contemplate what he'd done and what it meant. He spent weeks barely speaking, training alone, existing in a state of internal turmoil. Roy Keane visited him during this period, finding his friend in a darker place than he'd ever seen him. "This is hard, Eric. Harder than any match you'll ever play. I know, and I deserve it. I failed. Not just myself, but the team, the club, everyone who believed in me." Keane sat with him in silence, understanding that sometimes presence mattered more than words. Eventually, Cantona emerged from the darkness with a determination that seemed to come from somewhere profound within him. He'd been given a choice: accept the darkness and let it define him, or acknowledge it, transcend it, and rebuild himself as something stronger. He chose redemption. When the ban ended and Cantona returned to playing, something had fundamentally shifted within him. The volatility remained, certainly, but it was now channeled with greater intelligence. His competitive fire still burned, but he'd learned to express it through excellence rather than violence. Most remarkably, supporters seemed to recognize the transformation. Rather than turning against him permanently, they rallied around him, recognizing that redemption was a journey they could respect. His first match back after the ban saw him receive a standing ovation from United supporters. As he took the pitch, visibly emotional, he understood that he'd been given a second chance, something that few players in similar circumstances receive. He repaid that faith with performances of such quality and intensity that it seemed he'd emerged from his ordeal not diminished but somehow renewed. The remainder of the 1994 to 1995 season, combined with the 1995 to 1996 season, saw Cantona produce football of remarkable excellence. Free from the pressure of proving himself, free from the need to dominate through sheer force of will, he played with a kind of grace that hadn't been entirely visible before. He scored crucial goals, orchestrated magnificent performances, and most importantly, led by example in a way that transcended the controversial image that had been created by the Selhurst Park incident. Manchester United won the Premier League again in 1995 to 1996, with Cantona playing a crucial role throughout. But more than the trophy itself, what mattered was that he'd proven he could overcome adversity, could learn from failure, could transform a moment of darkness into a catalyst for personal growth. In an interview after winning the title, Cantona was asked about the journey from his ban to this moment of redemption. The incident at Crystal Palace was the worst moment of my career. But it was also necessary, I think. I needed to understand that my power over others was greater than my power over myself. After the ban, I realized that if I wanted to continue playing football at the highest level, I had to master myself first. The philosophical reflections suggested that Cantona had learned something deeper than just tactical football. He'd learned about character, about discipline, about the relationship between external excellence and internal control. The Frenchman who'd arrived at Manchester United as a Maverick had transformed into something more complex, still brilliant, still intense, but now with a maturity that suggested genuine growth. By 1996, with another Premier League title secured and Manchester United positioned as the dominant force in English football, Cantona had established himself not just as one of football's greatest talents, but as one of its most interesting characters. His journey from controversy to redemption had captivated supporters, and his performances in the latter years of his career suggested that the best was still to come. The final years of Eric Cantona's career at Manchester United became a masterclass in controlled excellence. Having learned the lessons that adversity teaches, having passed through darkness and emerged renewed, Cantona played his football with a kind of philosophical grace that elevated him beyond the realm of mere sport into something approaching art. He remained competitive, demanding, intense, but now these qualities were married with wisdom and self-awareness that hadn't existed before. The 1996 to 1997 season proved to be Cantona's last at Manchester United, though neither he nor anyone else knew it with certainty at the time. The club was on an extraordinary trajectory, having won back-to-back Premier League titles, establishing themselves as the dominant force in English football. Younger players like David Beckham and Ryan Giggs were developing into world-class talents, and Cantona took it upon himself to mentor them, to teach them not just football, but about the mentality required to compete at the highest level. Beckham, in particular, benefited enormously from Cantona's influence. The young midfielder possessed tremendous potential, but lacked the kind of ruthless intensity that competition at elite level demanded. Cantona recognized this and took him under his wing, speaking to him regularly about the importance of mental toughness, about refusing to accept anything less than perfection, about understanding that talent without discipline was merely potential squandered. David, you have gifts that most players can only dream of. Your right foot is exceptional, your vision is world-class, but you have to demand more from yourself. Every single day, you have to be better. Complacency is the death of excellence. Beckham absorbed these lessons completely, and years later, he would credit Cantona with helping him develop the mentality that would define his career. The Frenchman's influence extended to other young players as well. Giggs, Paul Scholes, even Rio Ferdinand when he arrived, all benefited from being around someone who understood what it took to compete at the absolute highest level and was willing to demand it from everyone around him. On the pitch, Cantona's performances remained exceptional. Goals came regularly, but they were almost secondary to his influence on play. He'd evolved into a kind of senior statesman figure, a player who orchestrated rather than dominated, who elevated through his presence and intelligence rather than through sheer force of will. Against Leeds United, the club he'd left to join Manchester United, he scored a performance that seemed to have poetic significance, returning to his former club and reminding them what they'd lost by letting him go. As the season progressed, there were subtle hints that Cantona was contemplating his future. In interviews, he began speaking philosophically about football and life, about the relationship between sport and art, about the importance of knowing when to exit the stage at the right moment, rather than lingering until decline became inevitable. Ferguson, recognizing these signals, allowed Cantona the space to make his own decision about his future. In the summer of 1997, Eric Cantona announced his retirement from professional football at age 30. The decision shocked the football world. Here was one of the sport's greatest talents, still capable of performing at an elite level, still young enough to potentially play for another 5 years or more, choosing to walk away. But Cantona's explanation revealed the philosophical maturity he'd developed. I could continue playing, but why? I've achieved everything I set out to achieve. I've won the Premier League multiple times. I've won the FA Cup. I've won the hearts of Manchester United supporters. I've learned what I needed to learn. Now it's time for the next chapter. Ferguson embraced him when Cantona made the announcement, understanding that his extraordinary player had made a conscious choice to exit while still at the top, to maintain the legacy of excellence rather than risk diminishing it through a gradual decline. Cantona's legacy at Manchester United extended far beyond statistics, though these were remarkable. 82 goals in 181 appearances, multiple Premier League titles, an FA Cup triumph, and perhaps most importantly, a fundamental transformation of the club's mentality. When he arrived, United were contenders. When he left, they were dominant, a club that expected to win, that played attacking football with confidence, that had established a culture of excellence. More than any single trophy or statistic, Cantona's greatest legacy was the blueprint he provided for how Manchester United should operate. The attacking style, the demand for excellence, the expectation that every player would elevate their performance in crucial moments, these became the template that Ferguson would follow for years to come, the foundation upon which the greatest period in the club's modern history was built. In the years following his retirement, Cantona remained connected to football through various projects, but he never returned to play professionally. Instead, he pursued other interests, acting, art, philosophy, proving that his talents extended far beyond football. Yet his influence on the sport remained profound, and players who'd never played alongside him studied his performances, learning from his intelligence, his technical excellence, his understanding of how to elevate not just yourself, but the players around you. The incident at Crystal Palace, which had seemed at the time to define his career negatively, instead became part of a larger narrative about resilience and redemption. Yes, Cantona had made a terrible mistake, had revealed the darkest aspects of his temperament. But he'd also demonstrated that mistakes could become catalysts for growth, that adversity could be transformed into wisdom, that true strength often came not from never falling, but from how you responded when you did. When football historians assess Eric Cantona's place in the sport, they invariably reference his technical brilliance, his goal-scoring ability, his tactical intelligence. But increasingly, they also acknowledge his character arc, the journey from volatile Maverick to wise leader, from player ruled by his impulses to player who understood that mastering himself was the key to mastering any opposition. Manchester United had wanted a striker when they signed Cantona from Leeds. What they'd actually received was someone far more valuable, a catalyst who transformed not just the club, but everyone who played alongside him. He'd arrived as a king and left as a legend, having proven that true greatness wasn't measured only in trophies, but in the legacy you left behind, in the players you influenced, in the standards you established that outlived your playing career. Eric Cantona represented something rare in modern football, a player who understood that greatness extended beyond the pitch, that character mattered as much as talent, that the manner in which you played the game was as important as what you achieved. In an era increasingly defined by mercenary attitudes and ego-driven decisions, he reminded the sport that there was another way, that loyalty and commitment and growth could coexist with excellence and ambition.